Welcome for a difficult morning by the Reverend Erica Hewitt. Whether you're here because worshiping with us is a part of your routine, or whether you feel like our country has been stopped in its tracks and it's impossible to return to normalcy, on this morning we gather to proclaim that we belong to one another and that others belong to us. Broken hearts are welcome here. Anxious spirits are welcome here. Minds whirring faster than a race engine, uncertain what to think. Stubborn egos that sometimes trip us up, cementing our opinions. Fragile, shell-shocked souls. Say it with me. They are all welcome here. Yours, mine, everyone else's. Not because this community will fix it through easy solutions or the right way forward. No, as a religious community, we have something far more fragile, far more powerful than that. Our need to be together. Our need to reconnect to the life-giving source that moves within us and among us, and our need to make one another a little bit braver and wiser before returning back to the service of life. Welcome this morning.
As we light our chalice, we share our church covenant. We promise to listen and learn together with compassion, curiosity, and an open mind, engage in creating a warm and welcoming community, work together beyond our walls to address social and environmental challenges, and with our time, talent, and treasure, support our church and its mission.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Pam Romancic, and my pronouns are she and hers. And I serve the Unitarian Church in Hinsdale, Illinois. It is so good to be with you this morning. We gather today after a week, which seemed to stand out in its horror. In a year, following a year of horrors. Maybe some of you, like me, are feeling a little bit off balance, waiting for some returning to sanity, for some retribution for people who have no respect for our institutions, some righting of the terrible wrongs which have continued to flow unabated for such a very long time. We gather this morning in sympathy and support. We gather to carve out a space where truth is honored, where justice is upheld, and decency truly matters. We gather in a belief in the power of love to save not only ourselves, but the wanting world as well. Welcome. If you enjoyed today's service, I hope you will share it with someone you know who might appreciate the support during this challenging time by this community. All of our past services for 2020 can be found on the church's YouTube channel, so you can go back and revisit favorites or find ones that you've missed. And even in the midst of a pandemic, there is still a lot going on at our church. So I encourage you to visit our website at www.hinsdaleunitarian.org or follow us on social media. The Touchstone will be coming out later today with more detailed information about things going on in our community. So look in your inbox or check on our website. And finally, if you're new and you would like to receive regular communications, you can leave your information in the chat box here on Zoom, or you can click the contact button on our website, or you can always send an email to the office. Each week, folks are invited to stay for a brief virtual coffee hour after the service. We split into chat rooms, can respond to messages, and get to know new people. So please stay for that if you have the time and the inclination. And reminder that because of continually high COVID levels, your office staff will be working mainly from home for the next few months. But if you need help getting groceries or have an emergency that arises, please do contact us and let us know so we can help. We have an emergency relief fund for this purpose. A little bit later in our service, we hold a space for meditation and prayer. If you know of someone who is in need of help or support, or you yourself need it, please do let us know. Today, we hold in our hearts Susan Hebel's family as they mourn the passing of her father, Ted Morris. We also hold the family of Scotty Soria as she gets to the end of life. Now, if you have something to share with us, please type your intention in all caps in the chat box, or always feel free to contact myself or email the office so that we can respond and help. I want to thank Linda Carlin, who's today's worship associate and who found some of the very beautiful readings you will hear in just a bit. And as always, our regulars, Jamie Passman, Suzanne Williams, and Jean Schaefer. This work only happens because so many people are helping. We stand on the cusp of a new year, filled with sorrow for our continued separation, but also hope at the promise of healing in a not too distant future. I invite each of you to light your own chalice at home as we begin with the hymn, Every Night and Every Morn.
New Shoes by Richard Wagamies, from One Story, One Song. There are nights I can't sleep, even up here where only the yipping of coyotes disturbs the quiet. When I get up and gaze out the window, I can see the silver sheen of lake beneath the moon. The cabin creaks. The dog pads across the living room to rub her cold nose along my shin. I can see the shadowy darts and dips of bats as they hunt above the yard. A furtive house cat prowls the line where mountain grass nudges the cultivated space of lawn. On nights like this, I read or write, or sit in the rocking chair by the window to lull myself into sleeplessness again. I'd rather be sleepless here than anywhere else in the world. I haven't always had a haven like this. Once, when I was homeless and in the depths of alcoholism, I woke up without my shoes. They were lined winter shoes, and I'd bought them with the last of the money I had. I'd set them at the foot of my blankets where I lay down to sleep, and in the morning they were gone. It was November in Ontario. Sleet was falling, and the streets were wet and cold. I made my way to a St. Vincent de Paul store. It wasn't open that early, but when the man inside saw me standing in the doorway, shivering in my sock feet, he let me in right away. The warm air made me shiver even harder. The man made me a cup of coffee and offered me a blanket to wrap myself in. He fed me a sandwich and a bowl of soup, then led me down the aisles and made sure I found a pair of shoes that fit. The man let me sit in the store until I'd recovered my body warmth. We talked about hockey and some jobs he'd heard about that I could apply for. He was friendly, genuinely interested in me, and when I was ready to go, he gave me $5 and invited me to come back again for coffee and a chat. I left that store with a new warm jacket, dry clothes, and a good sturdy pair of shoes. But I also left with a thankful heart and a feeling that I wanted to repay his kindness someday. Eventually, my life changed. I cobbled together some part-time work, and that led to a full-time gig in a warehouse. It wasn't long before I had a room and had pulled together a small pile of possessions. But I held on to those shoes. I wore them until the soles were thin and the heels canted severely to one side. Even when I could afford a better pair, I kept the old shoes on a mat by the door of my apartment through several moves. Now and then I'd buff them up and wear them on a day I had errands to run. They were a symbol for me of how the world could be. Many of the tenants in the rooming house Deborah and I run are former street people. It's a struggle communicating with them sometimes. Most of the people who are there are so direly poor and neglected that they've forgotten what they deserve from life. Many have lost the ways of graciousness and gratitude. Their speech is stilted and often uttered in whispers. But hardship can happen to anyone. In these turbulent economic times, a lot of us are just a few bad decisions or a few pieces of bad luck away from being there too. Remembering that brings us closer as a human family. Helping someone can be as simple as opening a door. It can be as easy as listening in a genuine way. And that's the way we'll change the world. One person, one situation, one act of kindness at a time.
I invite you this morning to take a deep breath in and then a deep, relaxing, cleansing breath out. Settle into your chairs. Allow, all the tremendous anxiety and worry of this week to drop through your body, to drop through your back and spine, through your hips, down your legs, out the bottoms of your feet, to drain down into that rich earth which holds us, no matter what is going on in our lives. Our reading today comes from the Reverend Thomas Rhodes. It is a meditation on letting go. He writes, "Let us enter into a time of meditation, contemplation, and prayer. Feel the earth beneath your feet as it supports you. Feel the love of this community as it surrounds and enfolds you. Feel your breath as it flows in and out of your body. Listen to your heartbeat. Take another breath and hold it. The air that you hold in your body is the most precious thing in the world. Your very life depends upon it. And yet, none of us can hold it for more than a moment or two, or else we would just strangle and die. What is most precious to us must be released. So that we may live and live fully. Look into your heart. Find what is there and hold it. The love you hold within your heart is the most precious thing in the world. And yet, no one can hold onto it any more than you can hold your breath. You cannot hold it any more than your heart can withhold its own blood, or else we would die from loneliness and misery. What is most precious to us must be shared so that we may love and love fully. Look into your life. Look at those things that are most precious to you. Look again, and you will find their value lies not in being held, but in being shared. Life, love, laughter, longing. May we share these precious gifts, that they may return to us multiplied beyond measure. I invite you to rest in just a moment of silence. We hold up all of those who are struggling this week, this month, all of those who hold fear in their hearts today. Breathe in, breathe out, release that fear. Now we turn to that portion of our service where we introduce our offering. While we were able to gather in person, we would have a share the plate one Sunday a month. But now that we're in the pandemic times, we find that one Sunday a month simply does not collect very much money for those worthy institutions that we want to share with, that we want to support in the world. So because of that, we have taken to reminding you every single Sunday. And please know that if you've given, you do not have to give again. And if you need help and support, this is not for you. In fact, if you do need help and support, please reach out to me, reach out to our community, because there are funds to help people who are struggling. We have groceries, we have support for emergencies that arise. This community exists to support and love and care for one another. So please, if you need help, let me know. And now, we're going to hear from this month's group, which is called the Food Empowerment Program. So I'll turn it over to them right now.
Hi, I'm Lauren Nellis. I'm the founder of Food Empowerment Project. I wanted to thank you so much for your support of the work that we do here at Food Empowerment Project. As a vegan food justice organization, you know the importance of the work that we do to help non-human animals not be part of our food system. As vegans, we understand the importance of where our food comes from, and so part of our work is also done to help farm workers who pick our food. We're also trying to get people not to buy chocolate sourced from the worst forms of slavery and child labor so that we can eat chocolate that is truly cruelty-free and isn't at the hands of the suffering or human animals or non-human animals as well. We're also doing our best to work to help those communities, mostly Black and brown communities, that lack access to healthy foods, to ensure that everybody has rights to healthy foods, but also has the ability to go vegan and eat their ethics if they want to. So thank you so much for all that you've done to support our work, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Hi, I'm Sharanya Krishna Prasad, and I'm the Executive Director of Food Empowerment Project. I want to thank the Unitarian Church of Hinsdale for featuring FEP and for collecting donations to support our work. FEP is a nonprofit organization, which means we're only able to do the work that we do as a result of contributions from wonderful supporters like you. And every donation makes a huge difference and will help us continue our work to create a more just and sustainable world in 2021 and beyond. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Susan Mooney, serving on the board of the Unitarian Church of Hinsdale. This is a time in our service when we remember the good things this church does in the world and invite you to help support our work. You can go to our website, which is www.hinsdaleunitarian.org, and click on the donate button, or you can simply send your check in to the church office. I support this church for so many reasons. The members and leaders of this community inspire me to think differently, learn more, and most importantly, take action and consider ways I can live differently. I know myself well enough to know that I wouldn't be learning about and doing some of the work I'm involved in now all by myself. And for that encouragement and support, I am very grateful. Now, even though we can't be together, I invite you to say our offering words together. This church is made up of all of us. It is what we learn together, the work we do together, and the fun we have together. It is what we share with one another, with the people around us, and with all of the world. Thank you.
Everything the power of the world does is done in a circle. By Black Elk, from the Sioux, as told through John G. Neihart. Everything the power of the world does is done in a circle. The sky is round, and I have heard that the earth is round, like a ball, and so are all the stars. The wind, in its greatest power, whirls. Birds make their nests in circles, for theirs is the same religion as ours. The sun comes forth and goes down again in a circle. The moon does the same, and both are round. Even the seasons form a great circle in their changing, and always come back to where they were. The life of a man is a circle from childhood to childhood, and so it is in everything where power moves. So ends the reading.
Thank you, Linda. Such a beautiful way of looking at the world, looking at our lives as parts of circles that continue around. Where are you today on your circle? I find myself in a place of deep grief. It is not a new place, despite events of the past week. Those only confirmed what has been a growing awareness. The America that I thought I lived in is not real. It has never existed. It's been a beautiful myth that I put my faith in since childhood. It's made up of those Norman Rockwell-esque prints featuring hometown parades and barn raisings, apple pies on windowsills, men and women working together in a shared commitment to liberty and justice for all. A place where anyone who worked hard could succeed. There were problems, sure, but I believe that most people of goodwill wanted to live in a time when little Black boys and girls could join hands with little white boys and girls, and where everyone would be judged on the content of their character rather than the color of their skin, to quote Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I loved that America. And yes, over the past few years, I'd begun seeing the ragged edges that used to be tucked neatly out of sight. I knew about racism and misogyny, but I wanted to believe that they were remnants fading into the past. Like so many who've been saying for these past 4 years, this is not America. This is not my country. I believed that the ugliness on our screens was simply an aberration, that America could not be a place of ignorance and selfishness and undisguised hypocrisy. My deep and abiding grief is that, yes, actually, it is. While covered over with a beautiful veneer, the underbelly of my country has been built upon an assumption of inequality between two distinct segments of our population, upon the unspoken assumption that some people, for some reason, are less human than others. Those counted as white are somehow more human than those designated to be Black. The nationalities and even the skin tones of the people in each group have shifted over the centuries. Either you belong to the dominant group and are accorded respect and the ability to have all the blessings promised by our nation, or you don't. I know many of you have been awoken to this truth for a very long time. Some of you have been peeling back that veneer, reading the histories, paying attention to the disparities in our justice system, and you've come to know that the laws on all levels of government have created and enforced this two-tiered system. On Wednesday, that horrific reality became undeniably apparent. We saw hordes of mostly white, mostly men, violently attack the very seat of our government with no immediate consequences. They pummeled their way in, roamed about, causing destruction and ending with 5 deaths, and they chanted, "Hang Mike Pence." And then they were pushed or simply made their way back out of the building, unmolested. Each person with me here today knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that if the crowd attacking the Capitol had been comprised of Black and brown bodies, there would have been an entirely different outcome. We would have been counting up scores of dead humans lying on the ground. We'd be hearing how horrifically they defiled our nation and our institutions, and not only from the right-wing media. Instead, we watch defenders of the status quo begin spinning an episode that this episode is no different than the Black Lives Matter protests this past summer, where occasionally fringe looting and violence happened to break out. I'm appalled and my heart is broken because I want to believe that the America I thought I grew up in was real. This morning, I am here to mourn, to acknowledge my own complicity in continuing the myth, and to implore those of you who might think I could be overacting to do your own work, to wake up to the lies that we have been sold in this country. It is not a small thing that I'm asking. It means rethinking almost every aspect of our lives. It means owning the fact that the entire system of Black and white is designed to separate, to divide and keep people who would be allies against injustice, who would be allies against oppression, to keep them apart from realizing what they have in common. I was not shocked by the events on Wednesday. I had hoped, I had even prayed that it wouldn't come to such an end. But you know, anybody who has been paying attention knew that the cult of Trump was not going to give up. A place where logic and reason and compassion have no place in that cult mentality. His members align themselves with a man who speaks aloud their deep bigotry, the thing that they carry in their heart. And he gives voice to the fears that have been instilled and enforced over many, many generations. The cult of Trump totally buys into the myth that one constructed race is superior to another. With all their heart, they want to continue that system because it keeps them on top. These folks are terrified of a country that might actually view all humans as equal. They're fearful enough to try to topple a government that seems that it might be moving in that direction. You might be surprised to know that I've had people in our congregation who come up to me and ask why I focus so much time and energy talking about racism. Why don't we just stop talking about it and fix the problem? Now, I have to admit, this has been a valid criticism of many UU congregations over the years, that when faced with a problem, our first impulse is to form a study group and to distract from what we actually should be doing to change it by spending too much time thinking about it. But you know what? In this case, a study group is not a distraction, but it is a powerful way to break down the ingrained patterns that we have in our very being of seeing the world. Because you know, you can't fix cancer in the body if you don't know what it is and where it is and how it got there and how it behaves in the body. Cancer is studied continuously to come up with new treatments, new ways of addressing it that will be more efficacious than before. In the same way, though, deeply embedded and ingrained racism is a cancer, which is killing our hope of ever becoming the country that we say we are. Until we study it, see its origins, and understand that it was put here by design, and it has been held in place for centuries by national, state, and local statutes, by shared mores, by public shaming, that we will never be able to eradicate it from our society. Because the primary unspoken tenet of racism is that we can't talk about it. And if you talk about it, you're going to be shamed. By design, it makes people uncomfortable to have to acknowledge the cognitive dissonance between what we say is true and what actually happens in the world around us. Those white men trying to overthrow a national election are the obvious and painful outcome of ingrained racism trying to retain its sway over our nation. I'm hopeful that it is a last gasp of patriarchy, that it's trying to kill the patient rather than allow space for healing, for change, and for regeneration. Yes, today I'm with you here in deep grief, and it's not a pleasant place to be. But you know what? Grief and mourning are actually a very helpful stage in moving from one reality to a very different one. When we have to grieve someone that we've loved, we move slowly from a space of their being with us to a new and different life without them. And it hurts. But that mourning, that grieving, that sadness that we carry also gives us space and gives us time to adjust to a new reality where we might one day again find some joy and peace and happiness. I am sad that the dream I had of America is gone. But like a phoenix rising from the ashes, its death makes space for something real and honest and life-affirming. If you find yourself in a state of resistance this morning to these things that I'm saying, I understand. It's hard to let go. I resisted seeing and believing this reality for a very long time, all the while convinced that I was an ally and an advocate of equality. To my shame, I skirted the issues of anti-racism work in seminary. I attended all the classes and workshops, but I already knew all I needed to know. I thought that some people just didn't appreciate how far we'd come, and they were making a mountain out of a molehill. And if some people just stopped being so sensitive, we could all get along just fine. But when Michael Brown was killed in St. Louis, remember Michael Brown? Doesn't it seem like eons ago? I finally began my journey through that looking glass, my journey from myth to reality in earnest. And I resisted all along the way, I still admit. Each time a new book came out, I would think, but I already know that stuff. Can't we just move forward? And each time I made myself read that new book or article, or watch that movie, or looked up the latest YouTube, I would edge a little closer towards understanding the lie in which I had lived my whole life. And be honest, each time I felt I reclaimed a little piece of my soul, because suddenly the world made more sense than it ever had before. The book I'm wrestling right now is called Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, and it's turned the key on my myth of America. The nonfiction book club in our church has already read it, so many of you already know it. You're ahead of me in this work. Cast describes the horrific functioning of racism in this country since its very inception. And weirdly, I have to say that I have found it both horrifying and yet oddly comforting. Horrifying, because it details the mechanisms of racism used by overlords on those forced labor camps that we've euphemistically called plantations. I've learned about the constant beatings and scourgings of human beings that were designed to destroy the normal human response to being forcibly made to work under brutal conditions. Cast details systemic lynchings and the way so many innocent humans in the designated subordinate caste were mutilated, were tortured, were burned, were hung from trees, and then had pieces of their bodies cut off to be sold as souvenirs. There was a shocking postcard industry that grew up, allowing supposedly decent human beings from the dominant class to mail pictures of the murdered, mutilated bodies to each other to celebrate the latest triumph of the two-tiered system of racism, a system which keeps both sides in their place. I honestly thought that the Nazi concentration camps represented the worst human beings had done to one another because we'd learned all about their atrocities in school. But this book details our atrocities, not only in the South, atrocities which rivaled the Nazis for cruelty and ice-cold inhumanity to human beings. And the weird thing is, I still find some comfort in knowing that we have changed and we have evolved somewhat over time. Police shootings of unarmed Black men are modern day lynchings, but at least most Americans are no longer sharing postcards of the events. And though I can't say what goes on in the dark pages of the interweb, at least they're not being sent through the US Postal Service. Our cruel and callous disregard for human life doesn't live as near the surface as it once did, but it is still there. And anyone who denies that it is still there becomes an accomplice in sustaining its survival in new and brutal ways. The insurrection on Wednesday was fomented and egged on by a cult leader who sustains power by telling both the unconscious and avowed racist in this country that he loves them and understands where they're coming from. And we may get rid of this president, but there are scores of people waiting in the wings to take up his mantle. Ted Cruz was sending out fundraising emails from his phone, even while on lockdown in the Capitol by the very people and kinds of people he was emailing. Fear is the heartbeat of racism that undergirds this country. It is there, it is alive, and it is more dangerous than ever before because it is afraid its time is coming near. Some of that fear that its time is coming near is caused by people of courage and commitment like many right here in our community. Our racial equity team, which was previously known as the Black Lives Matter Initiative, has provided numerous avenues to grieve, to move from one reality that is no longer true to another that brings energy and power. There are book discussions, beloved conversation classes, support groups that all operate throughout the year. You can dip in your toe at any time by looking at our race resources page on our website, or take a deep dive once a month with the racial equity team meeting when they take an event or a story from the world or from their own lives, and then they talk through how they could have responded if they find themselves in that position again, what they might be able to do in the future. They're creating muscle memory to respond to racism in real time instead of shutting down and not speaking as we have been taught to do all of our lives. They're also creating real and lasting relationships with our prison pen pal program, which breaks down even more barriers between human beings being human. It allows close-up personal relationships that transform both partners in the writing experience. So yes, I am grieving. I am moving from one beautiful but false image of America into one that is gritty, that has pain, but that is very real. Because grit is made up of this earth. And it is only from the broken down soil of past injustice that a vibrant, just, and new grace-filled reality can arise. Desolation can give way to consolation, to the deeper truth that we are all part of one human family, each of us flawed and broken and suffering and capable of causing pain, but also capable of change and growth, also capable of allowing the dream that is dying to make way for a real one, grieving the false myth of America and allowing a shining new story to emerge, a story which offers the consolation of being free to speak aloud our fears and to find support when we don't know what to do, the one that allows us to be freed from the systemic dehumanizing of our fellow human beings. It begins a story where each and every one of us belongs, and where we know there is always room for one more. Amen, and blessed be.
I believe in the sun.
Even when it's not shining.
I believe in love.
Even when I don't feel it.
I believe in God.
Even when God is silent.
I believe.
I believe.
I believe.
I believe in the sun. I believe in the sun. Even when it's not shining. I believe in the sun. I believe in the sun. Even when it's not shining.
A Legacy of Caring by the Reverend Dr. Tandeyaka. Despair is my private pain, born from what I failed to say, failed to do, failed to overcome. Be still, my inner self. Let me rise to you. Let me reach down into your pain and soothe you. I turn to you to renew my life. I turn to the world, the streets of the city, the worn tapestry of brokerage firms, crack dealers, private estates, personal things in the bag lady's cart, rage and pain in the faces that turn from me, afraid of their own inner worlds. The common world I love anew. as the lifeblood of generations who refuse to surrender their humanity in an inhumane world. That blood courses through my veins. From within this world, my despair transforms into hope, and I begin anew the legacy of caring. Thus ends our reading.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of its truth, the warmth of this community, nor the fire of our commitment. These we carry in our hearts and share with all the world.
Our benediction is from Praise the World in All Its Pain and Blessing by the Reverend Maureen Killeron. We are called today, from the midst of pain and challenge, we are called to praise the world. From a world that appears broken, we are called to praise life's moments of joy and grace. From time that seems to freeze in ongoing exchanges of platitude and blame, we are called to reach out to those around us, to connect with those we care about, to make amends with those from whom we have been estranged. The world is too fragile. There is too much pain. Let us bring our hearts together this day. Let us praise the mutilated world in all its blessing and its pain. Amen.